Hi guys, this short video is going to go through using Dreamweaver to create a simple HTML5 web page. The same principles that we use in Dreamweaver can be used in Notepad++ or any other basic editor, as long as you were to place the same code into that editor. If you're using Dreamweaver CS6 or Creative Cloud, the same principles apply here. The layout of the interface may just look a little bit different. Okay, so we're going to start off by creating a new document. We're going to choose a HTML5 template. Make sure you're using a HTML5 template, and you'll know if you've successfully created a HTML5 template because the doc type will just say HTML followed by a HTML tag. Now the first stage of creating a HTML5 template is to insert the HTML5 structure or the HTML5 tags we use to build our layout. We're going to go for something like this. If you need more information on HTML5 tags, just go to the W3 Schools website and have a look at HTML5 elements, HTML5 semantics. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is define my website. This is something you do in Dreamweaver to tell Dreamweaver where you're going to save all your files and where your root directory is. To define your site in Dreamweaver, click on Site in the menu, and in CS6 click Define Site. In other versions, click on Manage Sites, and we're going to create a new site. I'm going to name this Simple HTML5 website. And I'm going to choose my root directory, or the site folder that's going to contain all of my files, and then my CSS folder, my images folder, and all the other necessary folders and files that we need. And then I'm going to save this file I'm working on as my index file. Save as index.html. It's the name we give to our home page. Okay. Inside the two body tags, I'm currently working in split view, by the way, and I've got design showing. We can switch between live and design. Just make sure you're working in split view so we can see our HTML code down here and we can see what it looks like up here. And I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and I'm going to start inserting HTML5 elements. So I'm going to insert a header element first, and when the Insert Header dialog opens up, it will ask me if I want to insert at the insertion point. There are a couple of other options here, and we'll look at these in a moment. And if I look where my cursor's flashing, yes, this is where I want to insert it. Okay, so there we go. I have a header. Dreamweaver's trying to help me by putting in some content in between the two tags. And in here I might just put a heading 1, and I'm going to call this my simple site, my simple HTML5 site. And I'm going to use heading 1, so I'm just going to make that obvious by calling it heading 1. Okay, close the heading 1 tag, and there we have it. Okay. Alright, underneath my header I want some navigation, so I'm going to insert a navigation tag. Click OK, and we're going to go on and insert some more HTML5 tags. Now don't forget, you can jump back into here, have a look at how they do it. I'm not going to be using a section tag. We're just going to have one article that takes up the left-hand main content area and a side menu over here. Now, because this is my main content, I'm going to insert a main element. This will help Google down the track. I don't want you to worry too much about this stuff now, but this will help Google to identify where our main content is. Actually, I might insert that last because I want to show you how you can wrap one of these elements around others. So I'm going to insert an article. I'm going to insert an aside. And we'll insert a footer too. Now I'm going to highlight the aside and the article, and I'm going to insert my main. And see how it's already intuitive enough to suggest wrapping around selection. Wrap around selection. So I'm going to say OK. And I now have a main and a main closing as the parent element of article and aside. Okay, so I'm going to just fill in the title here. And now we can start replacing some of this content. Later on, we're going to attach a CSS style sheet and we're going to play around with the way this structure appears. If you want to see what your site looks like in live view, you can do that. Okay, at the moment it's all very basic. And I'm just going to replace this with navigation because it's going to make it easier for me to see what I'm doing. We're going to get to navigation later. So what we're going to do now is we've got a heading 1 in our document. So in our article, which I'll just remind you is going to be all of this section here, we're going to put in a H2. Okay, that all looks pretty good. I'll just put the G in there. Now you can make edits up here, but it's important that you understand how to use these tags and exactly what they're each doing. So I do suggest if you do get tempted to work up here, just do some of your work down here and make sure that you're not getting any non-semantic or poor structures happening down here, which can happen, okay? Now inside my article, I've got a heading 2 closing. I might just pop some text in here now. And I'm going to use placeholder text, which I've already copied. I just did a search for lorem ipsum, or dummy text. You can copy and paste that in whilst you're building your framework. If you want to put in real text and make this a real web page, then even better. Okay, now it's put in the paragraph tags for me. So that all looks pretty good. And now our sidebar or our aside, I'm going to just do the same thing, except this time I'm going to use a heading 3. I'm going to put in subheading here. It doesn't have to necessarily be a subheading, but typically the importance of, for metadata, for Google accessing your site, the importance of headings should be reflected by the tag that you're using for them. So a heading 1 will be most important, what the actual web page is about in its entirety, and then any sort of next level headings and how important they are in a logical order. We never put in a heading 3 down here and further down the page go back to heading 2. You can put 2 heading 2s in a row or 3 heading 2s in a row, but do not put a heading 2 here, another heading 2 down here, and then go back to a heading 1 further down the page. Okay, I'm just going to put in some very basic copyright text. Will's simple website. 2016. Okay, that looks fine. Now we're going to worry about this layout later. Obviously everything's not going to sit on the far left hand side like this, all underneath each other. But we'll worry about that with our CSS a little bit later, once we've gotten most of our main content into our document. Okay. Now just for the purposes of what we're doing, I'm going to copy this paragraph here and I'm going to paste that into our aside. And eventually this will sit over here. Okay, so we've covered so far how we should put our headings in. Adding HTML5 elements via the Insert tab or the Insert panel. What we might do now is create a simple CSS style sheet, and I'll show you how to attach it in Dreamweaver. The code that we use to attach it is the same code you would be able to use if you follow the same folder structure if you're using a different editor or Notepad++. If you're still thinking about editors, Notepad++ replaces Notepad on a PC, and it's a pretty good choice. It also uses similar techniques as shown here for highlighting your code with different colors. Okay, so I'm just going to create a new style sheet. File, New, CSS, and hit Create. And in here I can start defining the rules and properties for the different elements shown here. Now, there's quite a bit of split sort of opinion out there on the use of div tags in HTML5 documents, and look, most experts will tell you that they're still needed, and some of the times that we use them, or where they're most needed, is if we're going to be styling that element with our CSS. First of all, we can use descriptive names for the div. We can apply a class, so a div class of main head or main header, which is what we're going to use in a moment. I'm going to surround my header and my nav tags with a div tag. And I'm going to give that div tag a class. And I'm just going to call it main header. And in a moment when I style this, you'll see why we're doing this. And I might also use, no, we'll leave it at that for the moment. Now, when we style with CSS, try and think of HTML elements working from the outside in. And what I mean by that, just so I can show you on the video, if we were to style everything within the body tags, if I choose a font and a color for my body, for example, the body is an imaginary sort of div tag, if you like, that surrounds everything within the page. If I choose a font style and a color for my body, every single element within body is going to also receive that styling, because body is a parent element to every element. So when you're styling, you want to do as least amount of work as you have to. Okay, now I know that I need my navigation and my header to have white text, because I'm going to give my div class main header a background color that's black or dark gray or something like that. So all I have to really do is choose a color for everything within my div class of main header. Now I'm going to save this CSS file first, and it's opened up in my root directory, which it will usually do. That makes sense. I'm going to create a new folder for it called CSS, and I'm just going to call this main or styles. Are two of the most common terms. You can use either one. Now, regardless of which document I'm working in, once we've attached the main CSS, we don't need to switch between these two documents, but regardless of which one I'm working in, I can see my site structure over here. Inside CSS, I've got my main CSS file there, and I'm going to show you how to, regardless of which version of Dreamweaver you're using, attach a style sheet now. So inside of index HTML, I am going to go to Format, CSS Styles, Attach Style Sheet, and I can browse for it. I can go into the CSS folder and locate main CSS. Okay, choose link at this point. Imports what we use if the CSS file lives on a different server. Okay, you don't really have to worry too much about that at this point, but we're going to link it. And you'll see that it's put in this code for us, link href, so it's locating the folder, the CSS file, and it puts in all the necessary other information in there for us. Now, if you're following along with this video and you're creating a web page using a different editor, just pay close attention to what you see there. Pause the video and make sure that you get the same code into your own. Now any rules I apply in my main CSS, you'll see it's also available to me there. So really I don't have to have this open now. I'll keep it open in case we need it, but I'm going to put my rules in by clicking main CSS here because I'm still working within the index HTML document. So I'm going to start by defining some rules for my body. And I'm just going to style all font families the same, and the main reason for that is just because this is only a simple web page and it shows you how to apply font family styles to elements, and we don't need to create a bunch of different fonts for different elements, okay, or different tags. So I'm just going to go with a built-in one. I'm going to go with that one there. Now you'll see at the end here, these yellow ones, they're the more common ones. It's got an absolute fallback of sans serif. Sans serif, or sans serif, some people pronounce it, is just about on every system and every computer you could ever come across. So it's a really good fallback. It will try these ones first. If it doesn't have them and can't find them, it will fall back to these and eventually sans serif. Okay, now as soon as I clicked up here, as soon as I did it, there was subtle changes to my text. I'll take this whole line out and click back and you can see it change. Okay, I'm going to jump back in here, undo those changes, click back and it will change again. Okay, so it's finding one of these fonts, and we've already styled our document using CSS. Okay, I can switch between source code and CSS up here as much as I want to. And we're going to create some other rules now. I'm going to target my class of header. Oh, main header it was, that's right. And look, it's even suggesting it for me there, which is fantastic. I can double click that. And I'm going to give a background of, if you want to choose a color because you're not familiar with hexadecimal codes yet, you can double click on that and you can pick your color here. Okay, I'm just going to add a little bit of blue to mine just to show you how this works. I still want it to be very dark. Okay, that'll do. Make sure you close the CSS. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about how we code in this CSS because hopefully you've been applying yourself a little bit with some of the tutorials off Code Academy and you have a basic understanding of how to do this by now. Alright, so there you see we have our background colour. Okay, so it's starting to take shape. We're starting to build a little bit of a web page here. Okay, now I hope I'm not going too fast. If I am, obviously you're going to have to pause the video a little bit. But I'm trying to keep it reasonably paced. Okay. Now inside of main header, I need to declare another rule. I want everything in there to have a colour of white. Okay, so there we go. That's looking pretty good. And I'm going to change this back from live to design. And what might else we do? I think we need some padding for our main header, and padding will give us a bit of space around all of our text because it's sitting very close to the edge. Oopsie, never mind me. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to copy this colour from here. No, I might make it a bit lighter than that actually, it's a bit dark. Yeah. Alright, I'm going to copy this colour from here and I'm going to give my all the text in my body the same colour. Okay, it's just slightly lighter. You may not have seen that on the video. And now we're going to look at our layout. So we've used a proper HTML5 structure down here. It's a very simple one, yes, but we've got header, navigation, our main content area with an article, and our aside or our sidebar. Then we close off our main area and just put in a footer, okay? Now, if you want to apply the same rules to the footer as you have to your header, which in our case will make a fair bit of sense, you can add those same rules like this. Add a comma and then put footer in as well. Okay, and it automatically applies those same rules. Make sure you have the comma there. Okay, so we're getting close to a web page fairly quickly and fairly easily. We need to have a look at this layout now. With our padding for our header, because this header is going to take up the whole width of whatever screen someone's looking at, I really only want this main content area to take up roughly 940 or 960 pixels. So I think we should probably move that over a little bit. Now when we're dealing with padding, I've got two ways I can do this. I can put in padding left and I can define padding left and define another rule immediately under the entire padding. Padding is doing all four directions at once. I can say I want padding left to be 100 pixels and it will push it right over like that. That way is probably not one of the easiest, but it's easy to understand, but probably not the best way to do it. When we put in multiple values for padding like this, the best way to think of this is like a clock face. That 25 pixels you see now, once I start adding more rules, if I put 25, I can put 0, 25 and 125. Now what that does is 25 is for the 12 on a clock, this is the 3 on a clock, This is the 6 on a clock, and this is the 9 on the clock, or other words, the left-hand side. Okay. So you can apply 4 values like that. All right. Now, if I go back to our source code, I can see that I've used this main here to define our article and our aside. So if I target main in the CSS, I can apply some rules to it. And just to make it nice and easy for you guys to see, I'm going to give it a background. Really, I want it to be white, but I'll just give it something a little bit subtle so that you can see those changes coming through. Okay, so you can see that everything within the main has now got that grey colour to it. All right. Now here I can determine a width. And I'm going to say 940 pixels. Now that's great, I'm happy with the width, but you can see that it's still sitting on the left hand side. Now when we want to change any element in HTML to float in the center, or at least when it's our main content, we define a margin left of auto and a margin right of auto. And that sort of forces it to sit in the middle, okay? There's a couple of ways we can write this, but so you can see how it works nice and easy, I'm just going to use this method for now. And there we go. Okay, it's sitting in the middle. And let's just have a look at live for a moment. Make sure that's working how it's supposed to. Okay, that's pretty good. And finally, I'm going to target my aside to float on the right here and my article to float on the left. Now, you might think that we want article to float right, but really we don't need to do that. We just need them both to float to the left, because article comes second in the document structure, in the DOM, or in our structure here. We've got a side coming second in the list. Oh, oops, never mind. We've got a side coming second in the list. It will automatically float to the right hand side. All we need to do is determine widths for both of our elements and apply a float property. So I'm going to target article first. Now keep in mind, if you're going to use the article tag on multiple pages and you're going to use this same CSS for those pages, you're going to be applying those rules to article again. So you need to possibly apply a different class. You might say article class equals homepage, for example, and then just target article homepage here. But for the purposes of this video, we can definitely get away with this. Article, I'm going to give it a width first. And we can use percentages. Look, we'll go with percentages this time. And I'm going to apply the float property, float left. Now as soon as I put a float in, you see funny behaviour. You do see funny behaviour. You see the footer floating up over things, and we're going to fix that. I'll show you how to fix that. And you can see that the side has already pushed itself over. Now we don't really have any padding rules on these elements like we've applied to our header and like we've applied to our footer. So seeing as how they're very jammed together right now, we might just try applying some padding. Now you need to be careful when you do this because sometimes it bloats the element out as opposed to pushes the text in, okay, and it can cause layout issues. I don't want to go into too much detail about too many things with you guys right now. We might look at that in a further video. We're going to you'll be viewing another video shortly on responsive design, okay? So elements that change their size and their appearance based on the device that you're using. Now to get rid of this problem here, any element that comes immediately underneath a floating element needs to have that float cleared. So if I target footer now and I put in clear, I could probably just choose left here, but I'm going to choose both clear left and right. That should push the footer back down where it belongs, okay? Okay, we're just going to apply some rules to our aside now. And you might see some issues with choosing 40%. You would think that all up we would take up 100%, but it doesn't necessarily work that way because of the padding. Okay, so if I reduce this down to 30%, that should cover us quite nicely. Now there's some better techniques for doing this, and we will look at that a little later on. Okay, I'm going to save my work. And we might preview this in a browser and see that we're not having any problems. Okay, so you can see that's pretty good. Most screen sizes are probably going to be something like this. And as I said, we'll look at ways to design responsively in future lessons. Just noticing one small mistake here. Okay, so we might add some navigation now. And just going back to main CSS, I just want to demonstrate again what's happening here. If I change the width of a side to 33%, you'll see it pops down. Now, because there's 4 sides to any element,
if you really want to play around with these percentages, instead of padding as a percentage, padding as a in pixels as a determined width, we can try and play around with percentages. But you need to realise that when you add 3%, you're really adding 6%. Okay, so if I add padding of 2%, and I do the same for the aside, 32 should just be enough, because I know I've got 4% of padding if I count both sides of the article, and I've got 4% of padding if I apply both sides of the aside, leaving 92%, which is the width of these two elements. Okay, now just to be absolutely sure, there's no reason why I can't do that. Okay, now there's plenty of websites out there that show you how to create decorative buttons that look really good. So we're not going to decorate our navigation really in this instance, but I'm going to show you how to just put a few links down here to some would-be pages. Now, to help me demonstrate this, I'm going to save a copy of this page as my About Us page or something of that nature. Going to see About show up here. I'm working in About. Okay, so Live's taking me a while to come through there. Just to make it really clear which pages we're looking at, I'm going to change this up here to About Us. I'm going to save it. And now if I go back to the browser where I was looking at these files before, if I change up here to say About, it will load that About page. Okay, so I know that's all ready to go. And I'm going to add in some navigation here. Okay, see what happens when I highlight this code. It shows me down here what I'm doing. So I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to put in a link to the other document. Now there's a couple of ways I can do that. I can type in the ahref like this and choose to browse for that document and pop it in. Okay. And after I've done that, I need to still tell Dreamweaver or tell the browser what I want my link to say. So the link is obviously going to say About Us, and I close off the link. Okay, and there we go. I've got a nice blue link showing up there. Or the other way I can do it is using the technique we were using before for adding elements. I can add a hyperlink, and I want the text to say, when you're learning, you'll prefer this way of doing it. And the link is going to be to our About Us page. And in here I can choose all sorts of things like target. Now blank means it would open up in a new document. I'm not going to spend too much time, a new window. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. We'll leave it plain for now. Title is what you want it to say when a user floats over it. Visit our About Us page. And we hit OK. And there's the link. I'm going to go to my CSS and I'm just going to really quickly put some rules in for our links. Okay. So I'm going to say anything inside of nav that is an A or a link, I want the color to be green. Okay, I would normally put in the hexadecimal code, but just for our mucking around, that will do. Okay, and I'm going to save this, and that will save. It's automatically saving the CSS file for us, which is good. I'm going to go back to the source code for a minute, and I'm going to take out this line here so I can put it into my index page.
Okay, so always build your links in one page and then paste them in, for at least for your main navigation, and then paste them into your other pages. Otherwise you'll be going back and forth from pages, changing links all the time. Okay, so file, save, main CSS, save, and about, save. It's already been saved. Okay, so I'm at about now. I'm going to go back to the home page. I'm going to refresh it, and you can see there's the link to About Us. Now, I'll just quickly add a home link as well, so you can switch between those pages, and that will do for this tutorial. Okay, so we'll add another link in here. In this case, I can probably copy this, paste it in. And the first link is going to be index, and obviously we want it to say home, and we also want to say, change this to something more suitable, the title, go home. Now I'll demonstrate what that title does for you in a moment, and I also need to pop this into my main. Okay, let's refresh this. Dreamweaver's having a bit of a malfunction. Not sure what's going on there. Okay, let's refresh. Okay, so there's home and About Us. I'm going to go to About Us. I'm going to go to home, and you can see them changing, no problem. As I float over, see what comes up? That's what the title does. So when I talk about adding the title, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so there's your very simple web page. You can do this a lot quicker than this video, obviously. Once you've done it a couple of times, you'll be able to fly through doing that very quickly. And so, yeah, I hope you learned something. You can download a Dreamweaver trial in CS6 or Creative Cloud. I'm using Creative Cloud at the moment, as you can see up there. Yeah, so most of the trials are for 30 days. CS6 is on the systems at Chisholm. So have some fun, create something cool. You will have an assessment coming up at some point where you're submitting a simple web page just to show that you have been following tutorials and you have been learning a little bit along the way before you get your major assignment. Okay, enjoy guys.